I've discovered a lot of games based on British comics as of late, and it's been a right old voyage of the unknown, sort of like walking into a flat roof pub in a pair of bottomless chaps. I'm firmly on safe ground with this well-known trio of titles though, having played all three of them before the pube fairy paid me a visit in the late 1980s. And even better news, all three titles are highly polished games. What a treat I'm in for, Daniel Dare, you wonderful old rogue you. Before we lay down naked by the fireside with one of British comics' most enduring characters, it's always good to discover more about our playdate. We should find out more about him, don't you think? I mean, we're going to rail the lantern-jawed legend a solid 3 times, so it's only polite that we find out just what he's about. Colonel Daniel McGregor Dare was born upon this world on the pages of the Eagle comic in 1950. It made it very difficult to read, all that sort of baby juice all over it, not to mention the baby. He was summoned from the imagination of Frank Hampson, who helped to launch the Eagle comic with Anglican vicar Marcus Morris just a year before in 1949. Dan Dare's initial adventures were set in the futuristic decade of the 1990s and depicted the adventures of the Mancunian pilot of the Interplanet Space Fleet. One of the key advisors to the strip just so happened to be a young Arthur C. Clarke, who gave his 2 pennies worth on various elements of scientific plausibility. Dan Dare didn't just appear in the Eagle though, he was a right dirty dog and went with anyone. With Eagle on hiatus until its return in 1982, Dan spent a few years in 2000 AD with appearances in a range of other lesser-known comics over the decades as well. When Eagle was relaunched in 1982, Dan was shelved in favour of his similarly monikered great-great-great-grandson in a move that would have pleased early 2000s outfit Busted. That's a very dated reference, isn't it? Crikey. But yes, I guess that bought them a bit more extra time as the 90s were looming like an XL bully at a creche full of children covered in barbecue sauce. The Dan Dare stories tell of the ace jiu-jitsu practicing space pilot and his chubby assistant Digby in their eternal struggles against the Venusian Treens led by Dominic Cummings-headed supervillain the Mekon. Simple boy's own adventure stuff, yet highly influential. A British Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers, if you will. Dare has appeared in adverts, radio plays, and even got his own television animated 26-episode series in 2002. Rumours of movies have drifted across the thought sphere of producers at times, but nothing has come to fruition. The 3 computer games we're looking at today are all based on the original run of the comics, hence why Dan looks like an idealised World War II hero with his red cheeks and wispy eyebrows on the covers of each of the games. It's worth noting that the first game in the series is very different on the Commodore 64, as that was published by Electronic Arts, but I'm willing to die on the hill that the Spectrum one is the best one. I'll actually be exclusively covering the Spectrum versions purely as I'm on a little bit of a nostalgia bender for those titles, which I played extensively as a youth. The Commodore 64 one, while different, is still very, very good, although more puzzle orientated, and Dan prefers to punch his foes rather than use a laser rifle. It garnered rave reviews though and got a 94% from Zap64, so yeah, good for you and your bloody Commodore thing. So, to the Spectrum entry, Dan Dare, the Pilot of the Future, published by Virgin in 1986. It was coded by Virgin's internal team of Gang of Five, who also coded the sequel, along with the absolutely excellent Action Force 2. Here's a link to that video up there. Don't click on it until you've watched all of this. Dan is on a mission to mess up an asteroid base being used for nefarious purposes by the Treens, and rather doing this at a safe distance, Dan and Digby have elected to land on the bloody thing and blow it up from the inside, like ruddy terrorists, Shank's pony style though. Well, Digby doesn't, he just sensibly squats in the spaceship, keeping the engine running and being a bloody coward. While he's pulling his pud in the co-pilot chair, Dan dashes around the 130-odd screen base looking for 5 self-destruction keys that the Treens have left carelessly on the floor. He has a laser rifle which can be used to take down wall-mounted cannons, the Treen horde and the patrolling robo-sentries. And he's got a good old pair of Brexit bother boots to stomp the ever-living rump fudge out of the floor-mounted lasers. The base is littered with various lifts that Dan and his opponents can preambulate betwixt floors, but there's also gaps for Dan to jump across. And he better had, because he does sustain fall damage and will fall unconscious. If so, if the floor or a laser causes Dan to lose all his energy, he's placed in the most lax of all prisons and will lose 10 minutes before he just walks out of the open door. I've never been a jailer, but I'm guessing that is pretty sloppy jailing work. If you run out of time, that's game over. Every now and again, the Mekon will appear on the screen and throw shade at our green-clad bombardier, but he doesn't appear as an opponent in the game apart from that. What we have here is a bona fide classic. It is a masterpiece of game design, it really is. The game is structured into 5 different sectors, with a new sector unlocked once the previous sector's bomb has been set. Each sector is further and further away, which means that although a successful playthrough would only take 20 minutes, it is a game that you absolutely won't finish on your first try. The timer mechanic is so that you can fail several times, but if you've worked out an efficient route to the bomb keys, you essentially give yourself more leeway to get captured. You can even get tactically captured to take you closer to the self-destruct system should you have already picked up its key. Whenever I think of a game that rewards repeated plays, I think of Dan Dare Pilot of the Future. It controls so smoothly that even once you've dispatched the Treen threat, you'll still be more than happy to return to it as a comfort game, something I'm still doing 40 years on. It's graphically fairly sharp, and the sectors, while largely having the same blue paint job on their walls, feel distinct in their layout enough that repeated plays will see you pelting around the asteroid base like it's your bloody house. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's flawless. If you're running alongside a Treen, for example, he will drain that energy bar from your soul, leading to some unfortunate deaths. You can't shoot him from close range, so you can experience a bit of frustration with that. It's difficult for newcomers too, but give it time and I'm sure you'll be as taken with Daniel as I am. It is definitely in my top 10 ZX Spectrum games. Highly recommended. I'm pleased to say I'm not alone in my admiration for Dan Dare Pilot of the Future. All 3 major Spectrum magazines gave it their highest accolade. Sinclair User gave it a 5 out of 5 and their patented classic in October 1986, and they said it keeps the spirit of the original Eagle comic very cleverly, immediately playable, and it is brilliantly programmed. Crash gave it their Crash Smash and a 92%. In September 1986, they called it a game which lives up to the image of the cartoon character. The game is playable, addictive, and generally well worth the time, effort, and money of any self-respecting Spectrum owner or Dan Dare fan. Your Sinclair took it upon themselves to review it in November 1986, and they gave it a 9 out of 10. They said with the weight of tradition behind it, this game would be a chart topper anyway. But the main reason is that it's because it is a thumping good game. Tally-ho, Digby! That's what they say. I can say that too. I did say it. Dan Dare 2, Mekon's Revenge, released by Virgin in 1988, whilst being coded by Gang of 5 and keeping the game's graphical style, is a very different barrel of fish. It's not a barrel of fish at all. It is a computer game, but few can deny that it doesn't look kind of similar. While still being timed task orientated, you're mooching about on an anti-gravity bike instead of your feet. The Mekon has not been swayed by his last attempt to kick mankind in the collective ballsack, and so has set forth in a fleet of rather big spaceships to assault the Earth. Not only that, but his huge cranium has decided to do 2 things at once and develop a race of super Treens on the way, which are just stating away in little gross pods, ready to be thrust upon mankind. Dan, having successfully breached the craft, must now go and kill the embryos before they're born in a neat bit of infanticide in one of those are we the bad guys moments that you've just got to feel in this instance. Look at their little faces, now they're dead. Their faces locked in a perma-death scream before they've felt the rain on their face, the grass under their feet, or the wetness of a lady's clam around their genitalia. Dan Dare, what a bastard. Luckily, you can also choose to forsake your fellow child-murdering Earthman and control the balloon-headed Mekon instead. He controls rather similarly, but does the exact opposite of what Dan's doing. The Mekon instead is tasked with forcing their berth and dispatching them into space so they can fly down and lay waste to cities like Nottingham, Jakarta and Lomé. There's no time for whining on your back in a crib or suckling on a teat supertrine. You've got to get to work. Poor old supertrines, they're buggered either way. Once again, we're on a timer as we navigate the flip screen ship on either our hover disc if we're the Mekon or our hover bike if we're Daniel Dare. Once the first supertrine on each stage is either berthed or murderized, then the timer begins. Once 10 are dealt with, you'll have to retreat to the safety of the nearest bulkhead to save your protag/antag from being blown up as the ship goes bye-bye. Then it's on to the next ship, which is more labyrinthine and far tougher. Is it a worthy sequel to one of the Spectrum's premier licensed games? From a technical point of view, absolutely yes. It's not a straight sequel given the airborne zapping, but it's as appealing visually as the previous game, and the task-orientated nature is still in place, if a little bit more broken up by the multiple stages. It is very, very hard though, and it doesn't help that once you start, some of your energy is drained instantly by being locked in the vicinity of your opponent. Who came up with that idea? Additionally, the floaty controls always feel a touch too far away from being immediately responsive, so there's a struggle going on here as you try to bring your steed in line. The mazes are a little less coherent than Dan Dare 1, with some walls being passable and others that look the same as those simply not being passable. The closeness of the environments, married to the larger sprite and the constant bombardment of enemies, also make that issue of enemies just sitting on top of you and draining your health from the first game even more of a problem here. There is a good game in here for sure. I think if it was in a single map environment with much wider walls, I suspect I'd like the game just as much, if not more, than Dan Dare 1. It is still fun though, but it's perhaps just a bit too unfair to be an all-time classic like its older brother. Maybe less child murder might have improved it, maybe more child murder might have improved it. Depends on how much of a psycho you are, I guess. Sinclair user reviewed Dan Dare 2 in March 1988 and gave it a 7 out of 10. They reckon that Dan Dare 2 is a very hard game to get into. That's not to say it's a bad game, it just needs patience and a lot of skill to get through it. Your Sinclair reviewed it in the same month, and they gave it a 9 out of 10. They waxed lyrical about it. Could this be the perfect Spectrum computer game? If not, I bet you could count better games upon the fingers of one hand. I loved Dan Dare, but I simply adored Dan Dare 2. Crash weren't as taken with Dan Dare 2 as your Sinclair. They gave it a 74%. And they said, mixed opinions on this, but generally considered to be a decent success, but not up to the standard of Dan Dare. All changed then for 1990's Dan Dare 3 The Escape to close out our biannual visit from the good Colonel. Virgin are still the publisher, though now they've got Dave Perry's Probe on coding duties. Those colour-ringing wizards of the Spectrum are at it again with this absolute beaut of a game. Just look at it. A contender for the best-looking game on the whole system? I'd say that it's in with a shout. According to Retro Gamer, though, it nearly wasn't a Dan Dare game at all, as Perry and colleague Nick Bruty were working on a game called Crazy Jet Racer. It appeared as that title in a preview CVG had run, but once Virgin asked them if they could do a third Dare game, they swapped out that game's protagonist for the renowned Treen Botherer himself. Oh, and they also inserted this bloody big colourful Mekon sprite as a level guardian too. That probably explains the lack of other Treens in favour of these incredibly colourful and colour clash free goofs that want to get right up in Dan's grill. They are presumably from Crazy Jet Racer. The plotline to this has Daniel taken hostage and placed on a scientific satellite orbiting Venus. Presumably, the same bloke who left the door open regularly in the first game is on guard duty again tonight in number 3, as Dan has once again escaped. Someone tell Dua Lipa, as we've got a bloody Houdini here. That there's a reference to modern pop. I must apologise. Dan has found an escape shuttle, but it is completely lacking in fuel. So he's now got to scour the satellite for more of that wondrous vehicle juice. The Mekon, who's been working out as he's super swole, usually holds the key to the transporter that Dan needs to swap between the levels, so you better shoot at him until he gives it up. On one level you can just straight up go round the back of him and shoot him in the back as he helplessly fires in the wrong direction. In the last game we were killing babies, in this one we're shooting disabled people in the back. What a hero Dan Dare is. Extra equipment like better guns and bombs can be purchased via computer terminals, and goodness me, when you destroy an opponent, it's not shy about dying, is it? Boom! Spectacular stuff. You can do a power-up shot by holding down the fire button, R-type style, and it actually jolts Dan back a little. What Dan Dare 3 is a game of neat little touches. The teleporter sections break things up as you look to guide Dan through the confines of these warp boxes, without sustaining damage by going on the outside of the rectangle. For the longest time, and ever since this game came out, I thought this sprite was Dan falling forward and that he had a giant dong between his legs. But it's probably that the white bit is his jetpack and not his feet, and we're in fact looking at our hero from above. Can you see what I mean though? If not, fine, I still got the dick joke in, so I don't care. Beyond its impressive looks and bombast, what is the meat of the game like? It's passable, it's fine. Nothing more than that though. It's a fun little diversion and an impressive technical demo, but is it a really great game? I don't think so. It feels a little bit shallow and basic. The levels themselves are made tricky by the proliferation of bullet sponge uglies, but they're all very, very compact and there simply isn't enough of them. It is a brief encounter of a game, a teenage finger bang in a bus stop. It is all mouth, and if it has trousers, those trousers are very small. So, shorts? Is it worth a go? Yes, absolutely. But you'll have it done and dusted within a couple of hours. Sinclair user gave the third entry a classic and a 93% in February 1990. They said superlative graphics and thought-provoking gameplay make it a must. Utterly fantastic. Crash reviewed it in the same month and they loved it too. They said Dan Dare was good, Dan Dare 2 wasn't bad, but Dan Dare 3, wow. The last time I saw that much colour on screen at one time was on Cybernoid. Pretty impressive, don't you think? A smash and a 92% from them. Your Sinclair gave it an 89% the same month as the other magazines, and they were similarly impressed by those graphics. It might well be the prettiest, most colourful game ever seen on the spectrum. If not, it must be pretty damn close. And although that play area may be a bit tiny, it is still an excellent game. So, yes, to sum up, if I was to rank them, number 1 is by far the best. There's a bit of a gap, then 3, then 2. None of them are bad, but the worst of them is above average. Compared to the Drek I usually play, I've got to be happy with 3 good titles. Well done, Dan, you baby aborting monster. Right, I'm going to stop rabbiting on about comics after the next episode, I swear, but not before I've rabbited on about a comic rabbit. We're going to have a look at Usagi Yojimbo. Until then, like, subscribe, and K, thanks, bye.